Hello everyone, welcome back to just another F1 podcast here on the Apex Motorsport. My name is Richard Smyth and this is Season 2, Episode 11. I'm joined once again by Ryan Caldwell. Ryan, we've just had the Austrian Grand Prix. What's your immediate reaction to the race?
All I can say is, wow, that was quite interesting. No, I think it was one of the better races so far we've seen this season.
Yes, it definitely was a fantastic race. Much better than the previous race, the Austrian Grand Prix, which is at the same circuit. But before we start talking a little bit about the race, let's quickly look at our F1 fantasy teams. I don't think there's been a change to the lead, but I have definitely caught up, or it's definitely getting very close. Ryan, talk me through the past, the past race view, the past two races, in fact, of where your team stands now as we approach near enough the second half of the season very shortly.
Well, I'm not sure if I can't remember if we were talking about the Styrian Grand Prix there in the last one, but I managed in my Jap scrap engine team, so basically all Honda apart from Ocon. I managed to gather up 165 points, which brought that team, which was already in the lead, quite far ahead. And then obviously coming this week, even more points again. However, it's somehow changed because the team that I have marked as the Merc Engine Boys, which was a joke team essentially, Vettel, Bottas, Stroll, Norris, and Russell, with McLaren as the constructor, ended up getting the most points this weekend out of my other two teams, which I thought would have done really well, considering Max is the race winner in the Jap Scrap. But no, it didn't go awfully well for me, but it didn't go that bad at the same time.
Yeah, your Jap Scrap Engine team is still ranked first in our mini league, 1,575 points. Where my team, the Aston Martin Force India Racing Point, all the weird combination team, hit us in 1,488. And crucially, I have already used or wasted my Mega Driver in Hamilton at Monaco. You still have all your Mega Drivers. We all have our wild cards, but I don't think it's ready to. We're at the stage yet where we have to use them. For the Styrian Grand Prix, my best performing team was the Transfer Crew and Lance Stroll. They got 150 points. My turbo driver was in Perez. And for the last race there in Austria, it was my main team, the Aston Martin team, that got 180 points. Had Lando Norris as my turbo driver, which really helped there. But overall, yeah, you're still in the lead. It's still the 1-3-5-2-4-6 variant. We're rotating teams, but it's getting very close because your third place team is only 83 points behind my highest ranked team, so it's going to get very close. I think going into the British Grand Prix and beyond. Ryan, any changes you're planning to make for the British Grand Prix? I'm just going to stick with what I've got because the only team I can really change is my main team, and I'm happy enough with that team as it stands.
Well, in terms of what I have, I really can't change my Merc engine or my Jap Scrap engine team, because pretty much all the Mercedes boys have been used. And if I was to change them about, well, if I was to swap out Bottas for Hamilton, because I know Hamilton's obviously going to do quite well at his home races, he always does without fail every other year, even if the Red Bulls are challenging them, but Mercedes will make sure something happens for that. But even if I swap that in, that means that Vettel, Stroll, Norris, and Russell is going to have to be shifted about. The two Aston guys are going to have to go to stay. Daniel Ricciardo might have to get swapped for Norris, and Russell would have to go to the Latifi, and then my McLaren constructor would have to drop down to Williams, which I think might be too much of a hit just to take in one driver. So I think I'll just leave things as is. For my good team, which is in quotation marks, I have Bottas, Perez, Ocon, Norris, and Gasly. Obviously, with Ocon this weekend, took a big hit. Yikes, minus 14 points, which could have been very, very much needed. But yeah, I think I might just leave that as well. Not 100% certain yet, but we'll see closer to the time.
I think we'll move on to the race now, and in fact, we'll start a little bit before the race itself. For what was one of the best versions of a national anthem I have ever heard. Something very different. And Formula One usually have some fantastic, national anthems throughout the year. Andrea Bocelli singing the Italian national anthem last year or the year before. Like them sort of moments, they're iconic. People remember them, but there was a heavy metal rock style version of the Austrian national anthem, and I think that for me was the best version of a national anthem ever in Formula One. Do you agree with that, Ryan?
Almost definitely. And the show Red Bull put on alongside it, unbelievable. I only really seen it there for the first time about 15 minutes ago because I missed the start of the race. But I'm telling you, that was probably one of the best anthems I've seen, I think, ever. There was so much going on. It was so calm and at the start, and then next thing in comes the main guitar, and it just shredding away. That was class. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I definitely think it got people really excited for the race. It's just crazy what 2 minutes can do ahead of a race. But we all know that the British Grand Prix is coming up, and there's a lot of famous British musicians out there and different bands and artists that if why not go on put out a show. And instead, I think it's been Emily Haig that signed the national anthem the last few years, and they do it quite traditionally. So why not get Brian May and Roger Taylor from Queen on that starting grid, full capacity crowd to play the national anthem? What's your thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, I could see that working. I could see that working. It's just hard though because the national anthem in the UK's just always been that way. There's words with it, so it doesn't make it as, how could you say it, as able to be changed about in the simplest terms, I suppose.
See, the way I'm thinking,
quite boring.
The way I'm thinking is Queen always ended their shows with the national anthem, "God Save the Queen," because that was the name of their band. So it could be, it might just not be possible without Freddie Mercury and obviously Adam Lambert. They're currently lead singer. He's touring with them. He's not from the UK, so I don't know whether or not he would want to sing it, but we never know. I'm sure there's probably been a contract agreed with someone to sing the national anthem, because to change it, to not have someone a week before the Grand Prix is probably leaving it a little bit too late. But we can only hope. You never know. We've seen crazier things in Formula One. We'll actually move on to the race proper now, and it was a convincing win yet again for Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Ryan, I asked Craig this last week. Do you think Red Bull are now the title favourites, that they've got everything to lose?
My simple answer is no. They're not the title favourites. Mercedes are just getting quite unfortunate at the minute, and they're just slightly lacking behind. And when you think about it, it's Max who's out front. Perez is there aiding in most races. We didn't see that in this race right enough. He got a bit caught up at the start, and Mercedes were just able to still hold on to a 2-4. So overall, Mercedes are still there, and they're still just above the second driver. So it'll be just a little tight bit of competition throughout the rest of the season. There's still so many races left to go. Don't forget, what have we had now? I think it's like 6, 7, something around there. So there's still quite a lot to be done yet.
We've seen Mercedes during the race swap around Hamilton and Bottas, and we've since learned that Hamilton had damage, and that's why he sort of limped to the 4th place. Ryan, do you think that potentially if Hamilton didn't have this damage, that he would be able to fight Red Bull and Verstappen, or do you think just at the moment before they bring these new potential upgrades for Silverstone that the Red Bull are just the quicker team at especially at the Red Bull ring?
Yeah, at this current moment in time, yes. Obviously, the Red Bull is the quicker car. We've seen that pretty much through the season at the minute. Obviously, with a few exceptions coming into Monaco. Well, I shouldn't say a few exceptions because we've seen what happened in Monaco. But even Ferrari was convincingly really quick in Monaco. The tight street circuits. So there could have been a chance for something else to have happened those weekends. But Red Bull, they definitely got the start they wanted this season. They haven't led a championship in so many years. At this stage, compared to the lovely dominance of 7 years of Mercedes. But no, I think it's gonna be right down to the wire this season.
I know we've gone on the podcast. I think it's mentioned every single podcast about George Russell potentially getting this Mercedes seat. I don't think we need that discussion yet again because I don't think too much has changed. But Valtteri Bottas was quite impressive this weekend. Since he got the chassis that Hamilton was using from the start of the season, he does seem to be a lot more comfortable. But do you think that Bottas was just the better driver? Mercedes were focused on him, giving you the Hamilton damage, or is this the start of Valtteri? Was Valtteri Bottas 7.0, 8.0, whatever number we're on now? Do you think this could be his last chance at keeping the seat, or do you think it's too late and Russell is definitely just going to make that move up, whether it's announced at Silverstone or at the end of the season?
It's one of them difficult ones, isn't it? Because we've heard George in an interview with Sky Sports saying he's definitely going to be in a Mercedes engined car next season, so it's not that he's going to go anywhere else, but I can't really see George wanting to hang around at Williams for too long, so that really only gives him two other options. And well, I don't think McLaren's looking to switch, and I don't think Aston Martin's ready to switch yet, so it could be another season in the Williams unless there's something we don't know. Bye bye Bottas. But no, I think Valtteri's really pushing now this last, I suppose, the rest of the season, just to mark his point to be all, you know, next season, if you give me one more chance, I'm going to deliver the goods against Lewis. And to be honest, I think he could, because for some reason, Lewis just doesn't seem to be at the top of his game at the minute. You know, he's making a lot of very simple errors that he never used to make last season. I think it's because he's more under pressure now from the Red Bulls than he has the last other 7 years. But you know, it's crazy to see how this one change in performance for Red Bull has brought Lewis out in a different light.
I think it's the first time we're really seeing Lewis be challenged since Rosberg. We all know how that ended up. So maybe given that he hasn't really had this experience of having to battle too much, like the only real races where I can think of where he's had to battle for a pack recently, he's had a couple, but Silverstone 2018 is probably the only one that really comes to mind where he went down to like 19th and finished up in second, and he was in a title fight there loosely with Sebastian Vettel with the Ferraris. That wasn't
the was it the Turkish Grand Prix or the Portuguese Grand Prix when it was really wet?
Was that the Turkish when he come back to win? He won the title in Turkey.
I think it was. Yeah.
You see that there's been a couple, but there hasn't been too many in the heat of battle midway through the season, because Silverstone is near enough just near the halfway stage of the season, but in the early half of it, and where the title battle is still going. Where Turkey, things were sewn up, was a 7th place finish or something he needed there. So I think that he's trying to get used to the prospect of having to battle for Verstappen, and because Verstappen's been pushing for so long, he's been battling with the likes of Bottas and Albon and Gasly in the past, that he's got that experience of going wheel to wheel racing, where Hamilton just isn't, and potentially where he's because he hasn't had these battles for so long, it's been able to prolong his career because he's not actually fighting. So I think it'll be interesting come the end of the season to see who comes out on top. But maybe this new contract for Hamilton now will give him a bit of motivation. Once Silverstone happens, the capacity crowd, he'll really feel the support again, and hopefully that could be a turning point when he pushes for this record-breaking title, which he could be under a lot of pressure to try and get for himself and from the F1 fans as well.
Yeah, definitely. I hope. Sorry. Yeah, I think fans. Having fans at the stadium this year, it's gonna be something different, and it's gonna be a different performance for all the just everyone. Having fans at a stadium, we even seen in the last race, I think it really brought a bit of life back into the racing, as well as the British Grand Prix. We've got 3 Britons. We've got Lando, we've got Hamilton, and we've got George Russell. So, to be honest, I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, it should be a fantastic race. We'll get on to the British Grand Prix in a little bit, because there is a few different changes for that weekend compared to the normal race weekend. But one thing that did happen in Austria, and it happened quite frequently, and that was 5 second time penalties just being handed out to anyone who went or pushed someone off the track at all. We've seen right at the start of the race the battle between Lando Norris and Sergio Perez, where Lando squeezed Perez on to the gravel, and then Norris was handed a 5 second penalty because of that. And then we've seen Perez battling with Charles Leclerc and pushing Leclerc onto the gravel twice and got a 5 second penalty for each of those incidents. Ryan, just very quickly, do you think the stewards made the right call given the 5 second penalty? And do you think because they give one to Norris for pushing Perez off, the precedent was set and they just had to give one for every single time someone went off the track?
Yeah, I think this was completely stupid, to be honest. When we look back at it, it looks more like a racing incident for the first one between Norris and Perez, and then the second one, Perez on Leclerc. The second one was a wee bit iffy, and then obviously he went again with Leclerc. It was still a wee bit iffy in the air, was it, wasn't it? I think the first one was quite similar to the Norris-Perez one, but it seemed to have a lot more impact for Charles, whereas the second one only had him off the gravel for a wee short amount of time. But to be fair, Leclerc on the second time didn't have, the right amount. He wasn't alongside him like he was the first time. So the second one, I think, was again a racing incident. So there should really have only been one 5 second penalty on the day, and that was that Perez and Leclerc. Obviously, Tsunoda is a different story, but I'm sure we're going to talk about that now.
Yeah, I think if they had have investigated the Norris Perez incident after the race, I don't think Perez and Leclerc would have got the penalties. I think because they had said so early, and they would have known that Ferrari would have been calling for the stewards to sort of hand out penalties. Whether or not it was right or not, I think it really depends on how much Michael Massey wants this hard racing, which he said quite a few times that this is what he wants, and he's not letting that happen. So yeah, I don't think they should have been penalties, but we've seen Hamilton and Albon tangling there last year, or in Brazil. It happened in Austria as well, started last season. So that's, well, Red Bull cars definitely do not like that gravel trap, that's for sure. There's been quite a few who've gone in there in the past, but Yuki Tsunoda, for me, the driver who keeps going off the track is the one that abuses track limits the most, because every race he's being called for exceeding track limits 3-4 times in the race, and now he going in the pits, he crossed the white line twice. Brian, do you think Tsunoda is just... Do you think it's either he's just trying to push the limits to try to maximise his speed and this race time, or do you think it's just he just can't handle his car at such critical moments?
Let's take this from the comical side. Maybe he was just too short and couldn't see over the front wing to see where the white line was. But all jokes aside, no, he should have been able to have seen this white line, and I'm pretty sure they had a briefing on Friday about the way to enter the pits safely, and if you're side by side in racing conditions, it's slightly different. But he was on his own, and he kept crossing the line, so that is technically unacceptable. And he didn't do it once; he did it twice, so it was kind of fair that he did get penalised with something like that.
Yeah, it's the first circuit as well that he's had a previous race on it to sort of compare. So it's not to say this is the first time he was ever going into the pits, because he had all free practice, he had all qualifying, so he should know. Do you think that it's going to get a point where if he keeps exceeding track limits and keep missing these white lines, that it's just going to become too dangerous and the FIA may need to intervene?
I think Mazepin will have something to say before Tsunoda. If not, Lando Norris, because I don't know if you've noticed this, but he's only, I think it's like, is it 2 or 4 points away, penalty points from missing a race?
2 points.
It's really close.
Yeah, it'll be 2 points at the Silverstone Grand Prix or British Grand Prix. At the moment, it's 4, but 2 of them expire on the 10th of July. So you need 12 points, gives you a race ban, which will allow... Who even is there? It's Nico Hulkenberg, is it their reserve driver? No, it's Aston Martin.
I think so, yeah. Oh yeah, he's Aston Martin, but is he not a full Mercedes works?
Yeah, could be. So, well, could be a possibility for him. Yeah, it wouldn't be an F1 podcast if we
I
discuss reserve drivers.
It wouldn't be an F1 podcast without discussing Nico the Hulk Hulkenberg.
So it's very true. Yes,
I
it
don't think
is.
anyone else. I don't think anyone else would be worthy of that seat apart from obviously George. But George isn't going to race in the McLaren.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Really?
It would be interesting to see because
I
it would
don't
be.
know.
I reckon he could. He could really. He could be on the podium. If Norris can do it, so can
He
Russell.
would, but I think he'd much rather do that in a Mercedes instead of a
Well, it's
McLaren Mercedes.
a one-off replacing Norris. If he
It has
get
to be the one race. If it happens after Silverstone, if Norris gets 2 penalty points in Silverstone, and that, like, yikes, that would make it quite hard for George to make a decision what he wants to do. Imagine he does announce a deal, and then he goes the next race and races for another team just as a reserve. That'd be so funny.
it would be interesting. It would be if Norris did have to get a race ban, it would be Stoffel Van Dorn, Nick de Vries, or Nico Hulkenberg that would take over. Probably they would go for Van Dorn, given these. Well,
Yeah, I was
Va-
gonna say that.
in fairness, the two of them have good links because Van Dorn was a McLaren driver and Nick de Vries was a McLaren young driver up until he joined Mercedes in Formula E. So there is the links
I
there.
reckon it'll be Van Dorn.
Maybe possibly, or they might go with Hulkenberg given
I
this
wish they just go
experience.
Hulk. Come
Yeah,
on.
or
Look at him. He
last
just walked into a racing point and just boom, boom, boom.
at at Silverstone as well.
Exactly.
Everything's lining up. Who was it? Paul Di Resta last year as well for one of the races was a reserve driver for McLaren, so still a possibility. I think we're getting a bit too far ahead of ourselves saying that Norris will get a race ban. I highly doubt that will happen, but you never know. Let me see what else is on the list. Oh yes, George. We'll keep going back to George Russell. His battle with Fernando Alonso, I think for me, was one of the best battles I've seen all season. Just seeing the experience of a two-time driver going up against someone who's tipped to be a future world champion. Right? Did you think Russell was outperforming that Williams big time to keep the Alpine behind for so long, or do you think that for Fernando sort of just was biding his time and just conserving the car, conserving the tires, and then just went for it near the end?
Nah, I definitely think Fernando knew what he was doing all along. He knew he wasn't going to make that many places further on up. He knew he wasn't going to get any higher than 10th. So he just sort of, kept it. And then he was like, right, bye-bye, George. You had your fun. I'm now going to take all your enjoyment of getting a single point today out the window. And that's exactly what he done.
Yeah, I know he said after the race that he wished it was someone else than Russell. And he got so close. He got into Q3 for the first time, which was spectacular, and fair play to him for doing that because, as much as it's a short circuit, which will help Williams overall, he still outperformed his teammate big time. And for him to not only qualify for Q3, but to start the race, to qualify 9th and start the race in 8th place, that's very impressive. And especially the week before a potential contract announcement of Mercedes, it definitely is something that's encouraging and will get British fans quite excited for, not just British fans, but Formula 1 fans excited for the future of the sport.
Oh yeah, 100%. George is one of those drivers who has just shown he has raw talent. It's not so much that it's the car, because we've seen that car is not able to really challenge much at all this season so far. But then George takes it to another level, and you can compare that because of him and Latifi. Yes, Latifi's had less time in the car, but George just has so much more raw talent to extract the most out of that car, whether it be under the racing line or different lines he's taken, his braking, his acceleration, the way he turns his steering wheel, all these different little factors and stuff. It's crazy to show how the driver can make a difference to a car. And George has just really proven himself that he deserves a seat up in the big team sooner rather than later, as he put it.
Yeah, there was only a couple more points about the race, and we're not really going to discuss these because it's sort of, they said there would be no action. There was 11 drivers called to the church for failing to respect double flags after Vettel and Raikkonen tangled towards the end. And I think Raikkonen, he got, was a 20 or 30 second penalty, but he actually finished a place higher, which is crazy with all the penalties and stuff after the race. It does not make any sense that happened, but it did. Right, just all these drivers called to the church. Do you think it should have been blanket penalties for them or all of them? Just that's we'll just ignore it this time and we'll move on.
See, the rules are twitchy. Come on, at this point they've just watched the guy spin off. They're trying to get past. They're trying to see what's happening, and then they talk about the double waved yellows, not just a yellow, but the double waved yellows, which makes it sound twice as bad as what it really is. It's just a yellow flag, just telling you slow down. And whether they did slow down or did not to come under the delta, I don't know. Clearly, they were called to the stewards for that reason. Penalties? Nah. A warning? Yeah. That seems more respectable, to be honest.
And coming up at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, there's going to be a brand new format. We're going to see the introduction of sprint qualifying, which has divided a lot of opinions. And I think it's because of the way the weekend is going to work. There's going to be, on Friday morning, there's going to be an FP1 session. So that's first free practice. And then on Friday evening at 6 o'clock UK time, we're going to have qualifying, which I think will be one of the latest times we've ever had qualifying in a European race. So it'll be interesting to see how that works with the cooler temperatures and stuff, or it could be a really warm day. We don't yet know. Silverstone's the most unpredictable place in the world for a weather forecast, I think. But then Saturday morning, we're going to have another practice session, which is confusing because we'll have qualifying, so the cars will be under parc fermé conditions. Then we're going to have a practice session where the teams can do very little changes to the car. And then we're going to have the sprint qualifying race, followed by the Grand Prix on the Sunday. The grid for that will be set by the sprint qualifying grid on the Saturday, which will have been set from the traditional qualifying session on Friday. Ren, I hope you're confused as I am.
So is there two sprint qualifyings, or is there one sprint qualifying? Because you've it written as qualifying for sprint qualifying. And
yes.
Then, so when does the actual sprint race happen?
The sprint race happens on the Saturday afternoon. The traditional qualifying session, the free session, Q1, Q2, Q3 style format will happen on the Friday evening, which
so essentially what you're telling me is that the sprint race is actually a qualifying session, essentially.
Yes, it's not.
So where you finish is where you start.
Yes, so the traditional qualifying format that we see usually on a Saturday for Sunday's race is now going to take place on the Friday night. That whoever finishes that there won't be considered pole position either. That will be given to the sprint qualifying. So the grid, the traditional qualifying on the Friday will set the grid for the sprint race on the Saturday, which will then, the finishing order of that race will be the qualifying grid not the qualifying grid, it'll be the starting grid for the Grand Prix. It is far too confusing. This is meant to be something to help the fans sort of make more sense of the sport, make it more enjoyable, and we've just wasted 2 minutes trying to work out what it is because it is just so confusing and unnecessary.
It's almost as confusing as our Rich Energy video, which you should definitely check out.
It's been a while since we plugged a video in the middle of a podcast. I think we're due one. And on that, one of the people behind these decisions was probably Michael Massey, or at least the penalties. There's also a video up on the channel recently. Taking a look at his life. You should check that out as well. That's the shameless plugs over for this podcast. Back to sprint qualifying. It is confusing, and there's a lot of teams that are saying that they're not going to take part in free practice 2 because they're using, I think it's some of the Alpine Aston Martin, them sort of teams, they use a clutch or something that they use in practice sessions that they don't use in qualifying in the race. And because cars are under parc fermé conditions, they said that they are just not going to run on it because they do too much damage to the cars. It's not worth it for them. But I was thinking yesterday about why not allow the Friday qualifying to be the teams to go out and make the fastest car you can. There's obviously keep it within the sporting regulations, but they're not under park firming regulations. They can go out, take a risk, make the car as fast as possible, and then have that practice session the following morning to make the final few changes before going into park firming at the start of the sprint qualifying race. They say they don't want us calling a sprint qualifying race, but it's the only way of sort of making sure people understand that it is an actual race. Do you think that's a better idea than just putting park firming after one practice session?
I would like to see what you're on about, but just for the four lowest teams, or the three lowest, actually no, the four lowest teams, because that would make it a lot more interesting. You know, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo, and would it be Alpha Tauri? No, it wouldn't, would it?
You're
Probably
chatting.
Aston Martin, wouldn't it?
You're chatting Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo, and then depending on the circuit, one of the midfield teams, excluding Ferrari, McLaren. They're sort of, I called them last week, Formula 1.25.
So it'd more than likely be Aston Martin. So, but like, it'd be good to see them, you know, get the option to really tune up their cars to just to see how quick their slow engines can really go. You know.
Yeah. It would definitely be much better if teams were allowed to sort of use their engineering experience to put on new parts and take a risk, although they are going to have to take a risk if they're only on the park firming after one practice session. I think that will be the busiest practice session of the entire calendar, because they have 1 hour to, or maybe it's an hour and a half for the next qualifying to make the 3 hours practice. Not too sure. It's either it'll be the standard 1 hour or 90 minutes, but that's all the time they've got the entire weekend to make sure the car's fine. If you get that wrong on a Friday morning, you're going to suffer right through to Sunday evening.
Yeah, you definitely will. I think it's going to be good, just for the fact that people's going to be so confused and sitting there like, are we meant to be going fast? Are we meant to be going slow at this moment? Are we supposed to be conserving fuel and energy? I have no idea. Oh no, we're in a qualifying. Oh no, let's go. It's gonna be quite confusing and interesting to see how this works out.
I think what's going to make it most interesting is if there's a couple of tangles, a couple of battles on the Saturday afternoon, and a couple of cars have to retire. It is only a half an hour race, but if a couple of cars have to retire, they'll be starting down the back of the grid. There could be a possibility here that Verstappen, Hamilton, or fighting for the lead, and couple laps in the race again, a bit of tangle. One of them ends up the back of the grid, and that's where they'll be starting Sunday's race with the other one on pole position. It's going to be very confusing not calling the person who qualifies fastest on a Friday evening as pole position, because there's only pole position for another qualifying session. That's going to be, I think, the most confusing part.
Yeah, it really will. Imagine Mazepin.
Yeah.
Imagine him on pole. I mean, fake pole. One spins, everyone plows into the sides, whole race cancelled, every single car's out except one man, George Russell, gets all 28 points.
Yeah, there could be a possibility. I think it'll be interesting to see how much the drivers push on the Saturday race, because I don't think they'll really be wanting to go and sort of going for these mad overtakes, because then that's going to compromise them for the race on Sunday, because there is a couple of points up for grabs, but I think it's only for the first, second, third, and it's like 3 or 4 points, so it's nothing major. But with how close this championship's going to be, it could be crucial come the end of the season, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. And because there's a change up to the format, that means we're going to have to change up our predictions, Ryan, to give even more predictions, and it's going to be an absolute headache to try to work out the final results. Last time out, you and Craig are working as a team. For this, he predicted Lewis Hamilton in pole position. I predicted Max Verstappen, so I got a point for that. Then for the podium, Craig predicted Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, so there's 0 points for that. Where I predicted Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and Lando Norris, so I was correct with that. I was quite happy with that. Neither of us got the fastest lap point. It was Verstappen who got it in the race. I said Valtteri Bottas, and Craig said Sergio Perez. And then you'll be quite impressed with our wildcard predictions, because I said George Russell would get into Q3. He did, so I got a point for that. And Craig gave 2 predictions, and I'm going to give him I'm going to give him a point for these, because he said that Russell would score a point, which was close. He came in 11th, but he also said that Norris would be in 3rd place if he said that Norris would qualify in 3rd. He qualified in 2nd, so I'm going to give him a point for that because it was so close. Do you think, well, he's your teammate, so obviously you're going to say yes, but do you think that's fair?
I would say it's fair at just a point, yes.
Yeah, he gave 2 predictions, and both of them were very, very close. So, well, it's one of these ones we can debate at the end of the season, like the giving you a point earlier in the season for both Alfa Romeos and Preston when they're both kicked out of the points. So it's one of them debatable ones. But if we do, that means that you and Craig got 1 point last week. I got 3, which means I am now in an 11-10 lead. I'm quite happy with that. It was 8-9 last time, but I'm now in the lead. So you've a bit catching up to do. Let's see if you can get any points this weekend with the new style predictions then. So who do you think will be the fastest qualifier on Friday evening? Who will be on pole position for the sprint qualifying race? If that makes it any less confusing.
I think it's... why do I think it's going to be one of the Mercedes, even though I want to say Max Verstappen? I'm just going to say Lewis Hamilton.
Okay, I am going to go, because it's the Friday session, I'm going to go for Lando Norris.
Okay.
Who do you think will win the sprint qualifying race? So a 30-minute race to decide pole position for Sunday.
I think that's going to be Max Verstappen.
Okay, I'm going to go Hamilton then. I was going to say Verstappen, but I'll go Hamilton. Then the actual race, I'm going to go Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen win, which won't be too happy for the British crowd. But who do you think will be on the top step of the podium at Silverstone on Sunday?
As I said earlier, I think Mercedes is going to bring out a special package for Silverstone, so I reckon they're going to win it. I mean, it was so Lewis Hamilton essentially.
So you're not even considering Valtteri Bottas there, despite his podium last time round?
Not a chance.
Okay. So
Lewis will obviously get favoured for this.
And then who do you think will be in the podium alongside Lewis Hamilton then?
I reckon, well, it's going to be Lewis, it's going to be Max, and then I think it's going to be... Valtteri Bottas.
Okay, I'm going for Hamilton and Norris.
And I say that with my teeth crossed because I know he's not going to do that well, even though I probably should have said someone like Sergio Perez, but I'm going to just keep talking like this and hope for the best.
Yep, and well, fastest lap, I don't think there's going to be a fastest lap award for the sprint qualifying, so we'll go just fastest lap for the actual Grand Prix. I'm going to go Lando Norris, last lap Lando, because Bottas is a 5-second penalty. He's going to do in Austria at Silverstone.
And once again, I'm going to say Lewis Hamilton
gets
the fastest lap.
Keeps getting confusing because I'm writing the initials down the piece of paper and I keep writing LN and LH and it's going to get very confusing. Wildcard prediction then. This can be anything. I'm going to go out there and say that Russell will not be given a contract to Mercedes at Silverstone despite the rumours. Well, he's not. Well, I'm going to go. I'll put in another one then. I'm going to say he's going to get into Q3 again and he's going to score a point. There we go. Mad prediction. He's going to prove Mercedes wrong.
I'll give you a point each if both of them's right.
Okay.
So you get 2 points instead of just a 1.
Fair enough.
Now you better remember this when you go back to re-listen to what the prediction was.
Yeah.
What I'm going to say, both Astons within the points.
Okay. That's definitely a wild card shout given the sort of circuit Silverstone is. I'll give you that one then.
Yes.
So Ryan, any final thoughts ahead of the British Grand Prix? I think it's gonna be a fantastic race. It's definitely gonna be great. I am gonna be there, so there'll be content out across the weekend. Ryan, just final thoughts ahead of the race.
Same thing I say at the end of every time you ask me this. Mazepin no spin.
Okay, did he spin? He did spin.
He did.
Let me actually check the infamous Mazepin.com.
I'll eventually get it right.
Yeah, at the time of recording, it has been 10. Oh, they haven't updated the Austria one. The Mazepin, the Mazepin website, because according to this, it's 10 days, 8 hours, and 4 minutes since his last spin.
No, he did spin.
Yeah, he definitely did.
I'm sure he spun one of the practices.
Yeah, because all the F1 journalists were playing F1 bingo and telling everyone to take a drink when he spun. So yeah, he definitely did spin over the weekend. So hopefully, well, it'll be interesting to see if you get it right. I would say hopefully, because if he does spin in one of 2 practice sessions or during the race, that could definitely damage the Haas weekend. So it could be a costly mistake this time around, especially with the sprint qualifying, sprint race, sprint everything. Silverstone. It's gonna be interesting, and I think there'll be a lot to discuss in the next podcast about whether or not it's successful and stuff.
Craig.
Yes, well, yeah, it should be him, or it could be you, depending on people's schedules, I guess. Whoever, if you're listening, you'll hear one of the 2 voices, or potentially both. We don't know yet. Next Wednesday. We'll be looking forward to the end of this, because it's not be next Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. This is the end of a triple header as well. So there's been 3 podcasts in a row, so you're all being spoiled. So yeah, Ryan, thank you for joining me for this one. It was very enjoyable, and I hope everyone listening at home as well enjoyed it as well. British Grand Prix is next. It'll be great to see a full capacity crowd at Silverstone, like there has been for the past 2 rounds in Austria. And yeah, all the social media links in the description below, along with the website. And we hope you join us all the next time for episode 12 for the British Grand Prix. Goodbye.